I represent them, I objectify them by saying they, right? It becomes the they, right? They are suffering. They, don't you see they? But insofar as they are objectified by me, then I'm not really, properly speaking, doing any justice, to be technical, any justice to their plight. And this is where Freire, later I'll tie in, Freire saying it's the obligation of the powerless, of those who suffer, to make this demand themselves, which is backed up, which is justified by Nietzsche, right? So, on the second, one speaks of freedom. That is, one wants to get away from those in power. So, what I want to do is, I want to get away from those in power. Right? The powerless want to flee from those in power. And the question is, well, where could they possibly flee to? Would they want to flee to some other institution of power to subordinate themselves to another institution of power? Well, obviously not. Right? No powerless group wants to willfully put themselves in a position where they are subordinated to another new form of power. Right? This is obviously sort of the institution, when Nietzsche talks about the institution of religion and morality, right? Jumping from morality to religion, or religion to morality, still preserves the sense in which the design, this is note 12b, in which the design system still dominates those individuals who succumb to the value system, right? We have to obliterate both institutions, right? The institutions have to collapse. So these individuals need, in a sense, to find a will to power, to their own actualization of power in the world, right? So there needs to be, if you will, a competing power. Right? And this is where I really start to like what Nietzsche is doing, because it has so much practical, real-world implication. And later, in a few minutes, I'm going to start to show a lot of the implication that this has, especially for people who are doing like participatory action research contemporarily. There's a lot that can be said as representatives doing research for individuals who are oppressed, sort of the caveats and the care that needs to be taken. You can use a completely Nietzschean assessment in order to guide your participatory action research. You know, and I think that, you know, overlooking that contribution that he's made would be just absolutely tragic. Okay, so again, last time, and again, I apologize if this is just like ridiculously tedious, but it's an important point. I think it's a very important point. On the second stage of the will to power, and it's obviously important. It's the will to power, right? It's the stages of the will to power. On the second, one speaks of freedom. That is, one wants to get away from those in power, right? So here's the first stage. The second stage is this process of getting away from, and I want freedom, right? I want to be free. My will to power requires recognition of my liberation from oppression, right? I need my own freedom. I need my own space. I got to be able to do what I... Later we'll tie... I don't want to jump ahead, but later we'll tie this into aesthetics, right? Sort of creative freedom and the inability to conceptualize creatively, which is almost always the case why really, really great artists are drug addicts or drunks, or right? They escape reality. Intoxication allows them to escape, in a sense. There's so much application for this. All right, number 3. On the third, again, this is note 86. Number 3, on the third, one speaks of equal rights. That is, and this is very, very important. And this is where, you know, it took me a while to really catch this. You could overlook this and completely miss the point, right? On the third stage, one speaks of equal rights. That is, as long as one has not yet gained superiority. So I'm going to speak of equal rights as long as I haven't gained superiority. Now you have to stop there. You can't just go continue reading, right? It's a very short sentence, but there'd be a pretty graphic oversight if you didn't catch what he meant by this, right? So let's look at this. So this is number 3. We talk about equal rights. And this is number 3. So on the third stage, we talk about equal rights. But it's not just flatly we talk about equal rights. He doesn't just say, oh, you know, in the third stage, one talks about equal rights. He says, on the third stage, one talks about equal rights. Now the clause, that is, let me give you a disclaimer, it's sort of only if, as long as one has not yet gained superiority. Right? So if I am still insubordinated by this, let's go slow since you get it. If I'm still insubordinated by the system, I ask for justice, right? And if I recognize that my requests for justice are not working and I can't get justice, then I'm going to try and gain freedom and escape the power. And insofar as I escape the power, I transform my state of affairs from being powerless to being powerful. If that fails, if my attempt for justice fails, and my attempt to establish myself as a power, a viable power, fails, obviously because the power of the orthodox class is just too excessive, then what do? Is I ask for equal rights. Well, at least give me some equality, since I can't escape and I'm not getting any justice. Let me get some equality, right? That is, however, provided that this hasn't succeeded. Because if this succeeds, if I do become powerful, now here's the catch. So on the third, one speaks of equality. That is, as long as one has not yet gained superiority, one wants to prevent one's competitor from growing in power. Which means if I do gain superiority, I am now going to prevent my competitor. If I now gain superiority, I'm going to prevent my competitor, the person who used to be powerful, from what? What does Nietzsche say specifically? And I have the notes here. From growing in power, right? So it's a battle for power. How does the last bit look? Well, what I end up doing, and this is what Fourier talks about specifically, and I'll tie this in later, those orthodoxy that used to be in control, right, become the powerless. Right? The orthodoxy that used to be in control now become the powerless. Those who were powerless now become powerful. They use that power to then oppress those who used to be powerful, right? So that this state of affairs now becomes, this is number 4. I should just keep this on camera. This becomes number 4. And I'm going to give you historical examples to justify this, right? It doesn't really require historical examples. You can just do it all theoretically, which is what I like doing, but I'm going to give you historical. And this is active repression. Right? So you understand. Because this looks, and maybe if I could have like a flow chart, it'd be awesome to, it really would be awesome to animate this crap. You can imagine that here I am, the powerless, being oppressed, right? Here's this is the first state of affairs. The institution of power oppressing me. I am powerless. I want to escape that oppression. So I move in this direction, right? First I try and get justice, right? And that fails. Then if I try this and it fails, then I go for equal rights. But if I try this and it succeeds, I now become powerful. Insofar as I become powerful, you see my state has transformed from a state of powerlessness to a state of power. Well, as Nietzsche said, one wants to prevent one's competitor from growing in power. So if I'm successful, I now want to prevent my competitor, those who used to be in power, from competing with my power, right? So they have to become powerless, right? So what ends up happening is that they become powerless. Now, the individual that used to be powerful and dominate me is now powerless, and I, the former powerless, now dominate them. Right? And that's just freaking genius. This is what it is. That's just really good, right? So I mean, and what I really like about this is this is exactly what Paulo Freire warns against. This move right here, the move between what would that be? 3 and